Hey everyone, this is King Arjun Reviews here. And today everyone, we're just gonna be reviewing on one of the classic children's novels and children's books called George's Marvellous Medicine by Roald Dahl. And it's got Rik Mayall as the narrator and Jackanory, so yeah. Let's get into the review. Yep, I love the opening logo of Jackanory, I know.
I'm going shopping in the village, George's mother said to George on Saturday morning. So be a good boy and don't get up to mischief.
Yeah, I know.
Well, this is a silly thing to say to a small boy at any time. It immediately made him wonder what sort of mischief he might get up to. And don't forget to give Grandma her medicine at 11 o'clock, his mother said. Then out she went, closing the back door behind her. Grandma, who was dozing in her chair by the window, opened one wicked little eye and said, "Now you heard your mother, George. Don't forget my medicine." "No, Grandma," said George. "And just try and behave yourself for once while she's away." "Yes, Grandma," said George.
Yeah, the opening starts with, George's mother telling her son George to look after his grandmother while she's out for shopping in the village. Yeah, he was left alone in the house, and the narrator, Rik Mayall, says, it was hardly the best way to spend a Saturday morning with her, and then he describes his father working at a farm as a farmer, and they lived as far away from anywhere, because they lived in the farm they were in, and he got bored of staring at the animals outside the window, such as pigs and the horses, cows, and other animals. Then grandma tells George to make her a cup of tea, which she does. Then he asks her how much sugar will he give her. She then tells her to give him 1 spoonful and no milk. There are many other types of grandmothers in the world who are nice and helpful and kind, but not George's grandmother, because she's mean to him and she only cares about herself and not anyone else. And she sits all day in the window and she complains about everything, and she never once tells George any nice things, asking how it was this morning, how was his school, she never asks him if he could play a game of snakes and ladders. Yeah, and then George decides to go to the kitchen and made Grandma a cup of tea by putting a tea bag, putting 1 spoonful of sugar and adding no milk to it. He then gave it to her, but when she tasted it, she complained, saying it was not that sweet enough, and she tells him to go make it quick. Yeah, here's the scene where Rik Mayall's playing as imitating the voices of the characters by doing an impression. Yeah.
Grandma sipped the tea. "It's not sweet enough," she said. "Put more sugar in." So George took the cup back to the kitchen and added another spoonful of sugar. He stirred it again and carried it carefully into Grandma. "Where's the saucer?" she said. "I won't have a cup without a saucer." So George fetched her a saucer. "And what about a teaspoon, if you please?" "I stirred it for you, Grandma. I stirred it well." "I'll stir my own tea, thank you very much," she said. "Fetch me a teaspoon." So George fetched her a teaspoon.
Yeah, as soon as George gives her a teaspoon and added more sugar, Grandma only has them on her own since his parents were out and not at home, and and while Grandma never ordered her grandson like this, she only has them on her own, and she begins ordering him about and begins treating him badly. Yeah, she tells him that the problem with George is that he's growing too fast, and that she believes that growing is stupid and lazy. George says that he couldn't help if he's growing because all humans have to grow, especially children, but she doesn't care and says that it's a nasty habit. and she thinks that she's like not growing still, which George says that she did back then.
Grandma snorted. Rubbish, boy. Rubbish. Look at me. Am I growing? Certainly not. Ah, but you did once, Grandma.
Yeah, and then Grandma tells George that she gave up growing when she was really small, only when she was little. And she also says that she gave up doing all those kinds of habits like being lazy and being sloppy and being stupid. And when she asks him if he haven't given up any of those things, he says that he's still a little boy, which she then says he's 8, and that it'll be too late if he doesn't stop growing soon. Yeah, here's what she tells him, which Rik Mayall is doing an impression of them while narrating.
You haven't given up any of those things, have you? Well, I'm still only a little boy, Grandma. You're 8 years old, she snorted. That's old enough to know better. If you don't stop growing soon, it'll be too late. Too late for what, Grandma? Well, shut up, George. It's ridiculous. You're nearly as tall as me already.
Yes, and after taking a look at Grandma and seeing that her legs were small and her head only came up behind the armchair, George says his father was fine for a man to be tall, which Grandma says that he has to listen to her and not his father. And when he asks her if there is a way for him to stop growing, she says to eat less chocolate. And when he asks her, if it makes him grow, she tells him it makes him grow the wrong way, which is up instead of down. And then, Grandma tells him, to eat all kinds of vegetables like cabbage, which George says he doesn't like. And then his grandmother, while he was bossing him around, she makes him uncomfortable by scaring him by saying that he would have to eat insects on his vegetables like slugs and caterpillars. And while George thought it might have been a joke she was making, she says to him that she has eaten the insects, and he begins to wonder if he was a witch, and then he begins to back away from him and head for the door, which his grandmother asks him suspiciously and tells him to come closer.
George started edging towards the door. He wanted to get as far away as possible from this filthy old woman. You're trying to get away from me, aren't you? She said, pointing a finger straight at George's face. You're trying to get away from Grandma. Could it be, George wondered, that she was a witch? He'd always thought witches were only in fairy tales, but now he wasn't so sure.
Yeah, and as George went into the kitchen to get away from his grandmother, he starts thinking about how to get back a way to teach his grandma a lesson. And then when he looks at her old medicine standing on the sideboard on the table, he then gets an idea. He wants to make grandma magic medicine so that it will kill her completely or blow her head off, and that will teach her a lesson. Yeah, and this is what it said.
I'll make her a magic medicine. A medicine no doctor in the world has ever made before. George looked at the kitchen clock. It said 10:05. There was nearly an hour left before Grandma's next dose was due, at 11.
Yeah, and then we get to the next scene where George sees he saw a saucepan lying there on the cupboard or on the sideboard, and after when he puts it on the kitchen table by taking it, his grandmother hears him and she gets suspicious.
He took an enormous saucepan from the sideboard and placed it on the kitchen table. George! Came Grandma's shrill voice from the next room. What are you doing? Nothing, Grandma. You needn't think I can't hear you just because you closed the door. You're rattling the saucepans. I'm just tidying the kitchen, Grandma. And then there was silence.
Yeah, George tricks his grandmother by saying that he's like doing nothing. And then he opens the lid of the saucepan, and then he goes up to the bathroom to see if anything he could put to add in the saucepan by doing the magic ones. And when he got to the bathroom, he took the first one, which was the golden gloss hair shampoo, and then the white toothpaste.
He took a full tube of toothpaste, squeezed out the whole lot in great long white worms. Maybe that'll brighten up those horrid brown teeth of hers, he said.
Yeah, and as you can see right here, yeah, I know it's George who's making the medicine, but in this Jackanory storytime old video, it's Rik Mayall who was not only acting as the narrator, but he's being like George and adding in the ingredients. Yeah, I'll show it to you in a bit again.
Full tube of toothpaste, squeezed out the whole lot in great long white worms. Maybe that'll brighten up those horrid brown teeth of hers, he said.
Yeah, and then George starts adding other bathroom items such as the shaving soap, the face cream, and other stuff. And then as soon as he's finished in the bathroom, he decides to go to his mother's room in the bedroom, her dressing room, where he adds other stuff like perfume and pink plaster and lipsticks. And then he gets to the laundry room downstairs, where he adds other items like the washing machine powder, the flea powder for dogs, and yeah, the other stuff. Yeah, the canary seed as well, and the brown shoe polish. And he also adds a bottle of gin, which is like an alcoholic drink, but it's what Grandma was very fond of it. I'll show it to you.
There was a round cardboard carton on the shelf. It said, flea powder for dogs. Keep well away from the dog's food, because this powder, if eaten, will make the dog explode. Good, said George, and he poured it all into the saucepan. Well now, thought George, Grandma's medicine is brown, so my medicine must be brown too, or she'll smell a rat. A good way to colour it will be with this tin of brown shoe polish. He scooped it out with an old spoon and plopped it into the mixture. And he was just about to go into the kitchen when he saw a bottle of gin near the door. Grandma was very fond of gin. She was allowed to have a small nip of it every evening. Now he would give her a treat. He would pour in the whole bottle. And he did.
Yeah, I like how the camera zooms in to see Rick, pouring the bottle of gin in the saucepan. I'll show it to you again. It looks really cool and surprising and amazing.
He would pour in the whole bottle. And he did.
Yeah, I know. And when George got back into the kitchen, he put the saucepan down on the table, and then he went to have a look at more other items to put in there. He puts 5 more items, such as a tin of curry powder, a tin of mustard powder, a bottle of extra hot chili sauce, a jar of black peppercorns, and a bottle of horseradish sauce. And as he was putting everything in, he hears his grandmother again yelling at him by yelling, what is he doing and up to right now?
George, came the screechy voice from the next door room. What are you up to in there? Nothing, Grandma. Absolutely nothing. Is it time for my medicine yet? No, Grandma, not for about half an hour. Well, just so you don't forget it. I won't, Grandma. I promise, I won't.
Yeah, George once again tricks his grandmother by saying nothing. And then when asked if it was time for a medicine, he says no, and it's not until around half an hour, to which tells him not to forget, and he tells him he promised. And then when he finished putting the five other kitchen items in the pan, he wonders if his father had kept all the other medicines, like the animal ones, in the shed. And it's surprising because nobody had ever told him he shouldn't go in there and touch them. And then he decides to take the saucepan and go in the old shed where the 5 big bottles of animal medicines were kept high up on the shelf. He took the first one, which was the medicine for the chickens, the second one, which was the medicine for the horses, the third one was the bottle of medicine for the cows, bullocks, and bulls. The fourth one was the medicine for the sheep, and the last 5th one was the medicine for the pigs, it's for those animals who are sick and all. After getting them all done, he puts a bit of engine oil and a bottle of grease as well, in order to make Grandma's engine going smoothly, and some antifreeze as well. And he then decides to go into the kitchen to cook the medicine after taking the enormous heavy saucepan with him to give it a quick cool boil on the stove. And as George decides to cook it by heating it up, the marvelous mixture of the medicine was frothing and bubbling, and the blue smoke filled the kitchen with a smell. It was not that bad, but it looks like it's a fiery smell. And then George decides to continue to cook until he realizes that the medicine was still blue, even though he already mixed it with brown shoe polish. And then he decides to make the medicine brown by pouring the brown paint after going outside and getting the paint. And then he was called again by his grandmother, threatening to tell his own mother if he doesn't stop, if he's not being honest about giving it to her, which George says that he's not forgetting about her and says he has been thinking about her. And then he pours the medicine in. He finishes cooking and heating the saucepan, the medicine up, and then he puts the bit of medicine onto the bottle by replacing Grandma's old medicine and tells him that it's medicine time. Yeah, I'll give you the scene here.
Soon the marvellous mixture was frothing and bubbling. He dashed outside and came back with a can of dark brown gloss paint. "Where's that medicine of mine, boy?" came the voice from the living room. "You're forgetting me! You're doing it on purpose! I shall tell your mother!" I'm not forgetting you, Grandma, George called back. "I'm thinking of you all the time." The paint had cooled the mixture down and made it go a lovely, rich, creamy brown. He tipped all Grandma's real medicine down the sink, and now all he had to do was pour the new magic mixture into the bottle, using this small jug. There. He put the cork back in the bottle. "Medicine time, Grandma!" And holding a spoon in one hand and the bottle in the other, he advanced into the living room. Whoa! Part 3 tomorrow!
Mike me saying you're still here. Now, whatever you do, though, don't just leave the messing of the medicine to George, because I think he's the expert.
Yeah, I like it. I know, but anyways, guys, we'll get back to the rest later on, because I'm just gonna go watch a bit of TV and have a bit of lunch, although I've already had breakfast at 10 or 11. It's 11:38 a.m. in the morning, but at 12 I'll get around to be eating my lunch. So yeah, I'll see you guys. I'm gonna take a lot of breaks and cuts there, so yeah, we'll continue the rest when I come back. So yeah, I'll see you then. Alright, folks, I'm back. Yeah, guys, let's get back to be reviewing this classic story that Rik Mayall's reading. Yes, so then we get to the third part. Yeah, we reviewed on the second part. So, yeah, there are 5 parts in this Jackanory episode of George's Marvellous Medicine. So yeah, And then now we get to the third part where George is like ready to give Grandma her medicine at 11 o'clock. And what's really surprising is that the intro of Jackanory is replaced with that clock bell sound effect like a Big Ben clock. And Rik Mayall's looking at the clock on the wall with his binoculars, and he talks about how like it's time for George to give his grandma medicine, and he gets back to be continuing to read the rest of the story. I'll show you.
It was 11 o'clock. Time for George to give his horrible, wicked old grandma her dose of medicine. But he wasn't going to give her the ordinary stuff that she normally had. Oh no, he was going to give her the real thing. The marvellous magical mixture that he, George, had brewed up in his mother's great big saucepan.
Yeah, I know, it's a very good, interesting start. Yes, so anyway, when George came in to give Grandma medicine, he decides to, his grandma, argued with him, saying he was late, which she isn't. And when she asked him about the time, he said it was 11 o'clock, which she doesn't believe him and thinks he's lying. And then George decides to give Grandma the medicine by opening the lid, the cork of the bottle. But then, as he was putting in a bit of drops to the spoon, he couldn't help thinking about the items he put in there. But he'll get back to be thinking about the items later. So he tells Grandma to open her mouth, and when she does, he puts the spoonful of medicine, the magic medicine, the stuff into her mouth. And after when he tells her to swallow it down, she pushed the spoon right into her mouth. And the mixture is tipped into her throat. And it gets to a really shocking scene where George was waiting to watch the result, stepping back. I'll show you where Rik was reading it.
It was worth watching. Grandma yelled, "Ow! Ow!" And the whole body shot whoosh up into the air. It was exactly as though someone had pushed an electric wire through the underneath of her chair and switched on the current. Up she went, like a jack-in-the-box. And she didn't come down.
Yeah, it's surprising that it's shocking that Grandma screamed, and then because of the effects of the medicine, and she shot up into the air like a jack-in-a-box out of a chair. And then when Grandma comes down, she screams, saying that her body is on fire. And then George gets shocked when he saw the black smoke coming out of her mouth, and when it's about to fill the living room covered all over black smoke, George runs into the kitchen to get the jug of water in order to cool it down. But as soon as he tells Grandma to open her mouth, she does, but it was a bit hard to see. But he manages to pour a bit of water down her throat. And then, and then a sizzling sound is heard, and then it came up from Grandma's mouth, from out of his stomach. I'll show you.
And a sizzling sound, the kind you get if you hold a hot frying pan underneath a cold tap, came up from deep down inside Grandma's stomach. And they all had bucked and shied and snorted. And spouts of water came shooting out of her nose. And the smoke cleared away. The fire's out, George announced proudly. You'll be all right now, Grandma. All right, she yelled. Who's all right? Oh, there's squigglers in my belly. There's bangers in my bottom. She began bouncing up and down on the chair. Quite obviously, she was not very comfortable. You'll find it's doing you a lot of good, that medicine, Grandma, George said. Good, she screamed. Doing me good? It's killing me.
Yeah, it gets to a really shocking scene where Grandma, right after when George said the fire's gone out, he tells his grandmother to be alright, which she says she isn't, saying there's the pains of the effects of the medicine inside her body. and she was not being comfortable, and she says that it was killing her. But then something really funny happened. Is then Grandma started flipping herself out of the chair, and she landed by standing on the carpet, which surprises George. Yeah, Grandma didn't even say anything, and then she stood there being frozen. And then George wonders what is about to happen next. And then Grandma began to grow slowly, and when Grandma was about to head for the wall and was going on upwards, George saw what was going on, and she tells him, like, to stop. And he was getting shocked when he see his grandmother growing. And when he tells her to stop or she'll be hitting the ceiling, she didn't stop. And then when her head touched the ceiling, George thought that his grandmother would stop growing, but it didn't work. And then something really bad happened when she goes up through the ceiling and up into the room where George is at, and this is where it gets shocking.
There was a sort of scrunching noise. Bits of plaster and cement came raining down. "Oh, hadn't you better stop now, Grandma?" George said. "Daddy's just had this whole room repainted." But there was no stopping her now. Soon her head and her shoulders had completely disappeared through the ceiling, and she was still going. George dashed upstairs to his own bedroom, and there she was, coming up through the floor, like a mushroom. "Whoa, P!" she shouted, finding her voice at last. "Hallelujah, here I come!" "Steady on, Grandma," George said. "With a hey nonny no and up we go," she shouted. "Just watch me grow." "This is my room," George said. "Look at the mess you're making." "Terrific medicine," she cried. "Give me some more." "She's as dotty as a donut," George thought. "Come on, boy, give me some more," she yelled. "Dish it out, I'm slowing down." George was still clutching the medicine bottle in one hand and the spoon in the other. Well, he thought, why not? And he poured out a second dose and he plopped it into her mouth. "Pow-wee!" she screamed, and up she went again. Her feet were still on the floor downstairs in the living room, but her head was moving quickly towards the ceiling of the bedroom. "I'm on my way now, boy," she called down to George. "Just watch me go." "That's the attic above you, Grandma," George called out. "I keep out of there. It's full of bugs and bogles." Crash! The old girl's head went through the ceiling as though it were butter.
Yeah, it is shocking, isn't it, you guys? Because of Grandma, her head just came up through the floor of the room in George's room, right off to the living room and out in the downstairs room. And then Grandma still continues to grow and tells George to give another third dose of medicine to her, which he denies by saying no, and that she's about to bust the whole house, which she is, and she was going right up into the attic, and then George is shocked by realizing that she is going up through the roof, and he goes outside to see what was going on.
Ran downstairs, he rushed out of the back door into the yard. It'd be simply awful, he thought, if she bashed up the roof as well. His father would be furious, and he, George, would get the blame. He'd made the medicine. He'd given her too much. "Don't come through the roof, Grandma," prayed George. "Please don't."
Yes, I know, but anyways, as soon as George got outside his house, standing in the farmyard, he was still looking up at the roof, and when he thought there was no sign of Grandma, he begins to sigh relief. But then it didn't go well, since Grandma's head was already sticking up through the roof like a weird monster rising up from the deep. And then Grandma finally stops growing, and then her head was still sticking out through the roof, and then she tells George that she has magic powers over him, but George said that she didn't do it, and then he tells her that it was him that gave her the medicine. Then Grandma didn't believe this and thinks he's lying, but George says saying he isn't, and then he's being honest. But Grandma still doesn't believe him, and then George decides to make her believe him. He saw a brown hen pecking out in the yard, and then this gave him an idea. He tells Grandma to watch this. And then he crouches down into the ground by holding out the spoon and the bottle of medicine to the hen by giving it a bit of the spoonful of medicine to the hen. And when it taken the medicine, it had an electric effect on the chicken as well as grandma, and it screamed, and then it shot up into the air, and then it started coming down again. That's what happens.
The effect was electric. "Ah, ah, ah!" shrieked the hen and shot straight up in the air like a rocket. He went as high as the house. Then down it came again into the yard, splosh. And there it sat with its feathers all sticking out straight from its body. There was a look of amazement on its stupid face.
Yeah, and right after when the hen started coming down into the air, it had a shocked face, and then soon after that it began to grow. Yet, at first, Grandma accuses George of trying to murder a hen, but he isn't. But she and George were shocked when they see the hen growing, and then George tells his grandmother that it's had the magic medicine, the same thing he did to her, gave it to her. But there's like a difference between their growth, because when Grandma had the medicine, she'd grown into a thinner person, but the hen didn't, because when it was growing, it stayed as a nice and plump hen. Yeah, the hen continued to grow until it was about as big as a horse, and almost about as big as a house that George and his family lived, and then it stopped growing.
"Doesn't it look marvellous, Grandma?" George shouted. "Well, it's not as tall as me," Grandma sang out. "Compared with me, that hen is titchy small. I am the tallest of them all."
Oh, are you? I love it. George's Marvellous Medicine, part 4 in Jackanory tomorrow. Whatever more now.
Yeah, I know it. And then we get to the fourth scene where George's parents came back from shopping in the village. Yeah, his mother and his father, yeah. The mother was shocked when she saw Grandma, like her grandmother, being stuck on the roof, and the father, whose name was Mr. Cranky, was shocked at the brown hen. Yet the mother's name was also Mrs. Cranky, yeah. The father, gets very surprised, and he wants to make more giant animals to grow after George tells him about the magic medicine. Then Grandma is eventually released from the rooftop when Mr. Cranky called the crane company to lift her out of the house by sending one of the biggest cranes. And then when Grandma was released, she had to sleep that night in a hay barn with the rats and the mice, all because she couldn't get back into the house because she was too big. And then the following morning, George was having breakfast with his family when his father discussed plans about, making more medicines to make more animals grow.
As soon as the crane had lowered her to the ground, she ran over to George's huge pony, Jack Frost, and jumped on his back. Then the ancient old hag galloped about the farm on the gigantic pony, jumping over trees and sheds and shouting, "Get out of my way! Clear the decks! Stand aside, all you miserable midgets, or I'll trample you all to death!" Yeah, and other silly things like that. But because Grandma was now much too tall to get back into the house, she had to sleep that night in the hay barn with the mice and the rats. And the next day, George's father came down to breakfast in a state of even greater excitement than ever.
Yes, and then when George says, after when Mr. Cranky says that they will sell it to every farmer to make more giant animals, and building a Marvellous medicine factory and selling the bottles and planning to become more famous and rich, George tells him that he couldn't remember the ingredients he put in a pan, but Mr. Cranky tells him not to worry. And then when he asks his son a question about what he put in it, George recalls by saying that he went to the bathroom and then to his mother's dressing room. Then Mr. Cranky started making a list as soon as they got there, as well as the laundry room, and then into the shed where he put all the 5 empty bottles of animal medicines on the pan. And when George couldn't remember anything else, his father decides to buy more stuff from the store and into the vet as well. And when he puts them on the table, he tells George to show him how he did it all together. But then it starts to go a bit wrong when he almost forgot the brown paint that was used to make the medicine when they cooked it to make it a blue medicine. Yeah, here's what happens.
With everything so close at hand, the whole job didn't take George more than 10 minutes. But when it was all done, the saucepan didn't somehow seem to be quite as full as it had been the first time. "Now what did you do?" cried Mr. Cranky. "Did you stir it?" I boiled it," George said, "but not for long, and I stirred it as well." So Mr. Cranky lit the gas under the saucepan, and George stirred the mixture with the same long wooden spoon he'd used before. It's not brown enough," George said. "Wait a minute, I know what I've forgotten." "What?" cried Mr. Cranky. "Tell me, quick, because if we've forgotten even one tiny thing, then it won't work. At least, not in the same way." "A quart of brown gloss paint," George said. "That's what I've forgotten." Mr. Killycranky shot out of the house and into his car like a rocket. He sped down to the village and he bought the paint and he rushed back again. He opened the can in the kitchen and he handed it to George. George poured the paint into the saucepan. "Aha! That's better," George said. "That's much more like the right colour."
Yeah, George begins to pour the paint into the saucepan, which makes his father happy and excited. And then after when he says that it's ready, he says that they should test it on another chicken. Yeah, even though George and his father have already given the marvelous medicine to the animals outside their house. Yeah, there are some of the chickens, like unlike the giant brown hen, yes, some of the other chickens didn't have the magic medicine, which was why they had to make the magic medicine again and give it to the other chickens to test it to see if they've got it right or wrong. And yeah, let's see what Rik Mayall has to say when he starts to recap about what happens in the fourth one, and then we get to the last fifth one in the Jackanory series in this video, I know.
Mrs. Cranky wasn't very keen to leave her mother sticking up through a roof for the rest of her life. So in the end, two men came with a crane and lifted Grandma out. George's medicine hadn't made her any less grumpy or bad-tempered, but it had made her very tall. And the only place for her to sleep was in the hay barn with the mice and rats. In the meantime, George and his father had used up all the medicine making gigantic animals. They gave it to the pig, the bullocks, the sheep, the pony, and the nanny goat. The marvellous medicine was so fantastic that George and his father went straight back indoors to make some more. The new mixture looked and smelt just as powerful as the first lot, but just to make sure, George took a spoonful out into the farmyard to try it out on one of the chickens.
Yeah, Rick, I know, yeah. Yeah. And what's really funny, guys, is that the scene where Rick was talking about how George and his father made the medicine by using the mixture on the animals, he was seen making a really funny face by sticking his tongue and making a funny face. Yeah, I know. And yeah, and then George starts giving the medicine to one of the other chickens. The second, I know the first one he did was the brown hen, but the second one which he gave to was another chicken, which was a white one with black specks and its feathers. Then George started giving the other second hen the medicine, and when it did, it shot up into the air, and the effect on the medicine was not exactly quite the same like the first one, which was Marvellous Medicine number 1, but it starts to get a bit really interesting. Yeah, this was Marvellous Medicine number 2. Yeah, when the other hand shrieked and came down again, sparks began flying out of its beak like fire. And then unlike the other hen, unlike the brown hen who starts growing, growing, like his body growing. The other second hen's body didn't grow. Instead, its legs began to grow longer, while his body stayed the same size. And when it stopped growing, George and his father were shocked and confused. And then they noticed that something was wrong. When the second chicken was growing, it had its long legs and its ordinary little body as it was standing on top. It looked like it was on stilts. Then Mr. Cranky realizes that they've got it wrong and saying that no one wants to eat a chicken's legs. George realizes he must have forgotten what it was, and when asked about what he left out, he realizes that he forgot to add in the flea powder for dogs recipe in, as well as the shoe polish. Then the father starts running into his car and bought the two other items, which he gave it to his son, and George poured the other two items into the saucepan and boiled and mixed it. And then the other attempt begins to, to work, which is called Marvellous Medicine number 3. Yeah, and when George finished cooking the other two items that his father bought, he begins to, go out into the yard again to try it out on another chicken. His parents came as well, and when Mr. Cranky tells him, that to make sure that it's got... When Mr. Cranky tells him that the other chicken will lay eggs as large as footballs, the mother tells him that he and his son will do better than they did last time. Then George starts giving to another third chicken, which was a cockerel, a black cockerel, like a rooster type of thing. Yeah, the cockerel took a sip, took a bit out of the medicine spoon, and then after when it goes peck, it started screaming and yelling up by shooting up into the air and coming down again. I'll show you.
The cockerel looked at the spoon and went, peck. Then, ah! George and his father and mother watched as the cockerel shot up into the air and came back down again. "Watch him now," cried Mr. Cranky. "Watch him grow. Any moment he's going to start getting bigger and bigger."
Yeah, the father yells, saying he was expecting for it to grow, but the cockerel, stood quite still in the yard. It kind of looked as though it had a headache. And then instead of, growing the same way as the brown hen, and almost the same way as the chicken who grew legs like stilts, its neck began to grow, and then okay. Yeah, the cockerel's body didn't grow, but its neck began to grow, where it was about 6 feet long after when it stopped. Then Mr. Cranky asks George about what else he had forgotten. He had forgotten to put it in, which George says he doesn't know, but his father says he does, and tells him to think, saying that there's probably one item missing, and he's got to remember it. Then George remembers, saying that he has added some engine oil in the shed. Then Mr. Cranky tells him it's the answer, and he knows that it's on the list, and he asks how much does he put in, which he says half a point. Then George's mother says that he and his father will go on to have some weird chickens in the yard if they keep going on giving the wrong ingredients to them like this. But Mr. Cranky tells her that they've got to this time, and they're having to see if it's right or not. Then George starts mixing the engine oil into the pan and putting it into the cup of the medicine in it. And then he once again got out into the yard and starts giving to another hen, but this time it's another brown hen, which he did. And then the brown hen looked at the spoon and went peck after taking the medicine mixed with the engine oil. But instead of growing, like in a wrong way, it says like ouch and pain, and a funny weird whistling noise comes out as the effect starts doing something to him. I'll show you.
The brown hen walked over and looked at the spoon. Then it went, pick! Ouch, it said. And then a funny whistling noise came out of its beak. Watch it grow, shouted Mr. Cranky. Don't be too sure, said Mrs. Cranky. Why is it whistling like that? Keep quiet, woman, cried Mr. Cranky. Give it a chance. It's getting smaller, said George. Look at it, Dad, it's shrinking. And indeed it was. In less than a minute, the hen was no bigger than a new hatched chick. It looked ridiculous.
Yeah, it gets really sad and confusing because of how the other brown hen was shrinking instead of growing until it was about as almost as a tiny chick, and it looked a bit weird and ridiculous. Then the mother tells them to give up because they will never get the recipe right. But as soon as after she said it, Grandma comes out after being in the barnyard for about a day, and she gets angry at George and his parents, and then she yells about not having to listen to her and not give anything for her to eat and drink, as well as having a cup of tea. I know.
And at that point, Grandma came striding into the yard. From her enormous height, she glared down at the three people below her, and she shouted, "What's going on around here? Why hasn't anybody brought me my morning cup of tea? It's bad enough having to sleep in the barn with the rats and the mice, but I'll be blowed if I'm going to starve as well. No tea, no eggs and bacon, no buttered toast." "Oh, I'm sorry, Mother," Mrs. Cranky said. "We've been terribly busy. I'll get you something right away." "Let George get it, the lazy little brute," Grandma shouted. Just then, the old woman spotted the cup in George's hand. She bent down and peered into it, and she saw that it was full of brown liquid. It looked very much like tea. "Ho, ho!" she cried. "Ha, ha! So that's your little game, is it? You look after yourself all right, don't you? You make sure you've got a nice cup of morning tea, but you didn't think to bring one to your poor old Grandma. I always knew you were a selfish pig. Hand it over, George." "No," cried Mrs. Cranky. "No, Mother, don't. That's not for you." "Now you..."
Yeah, it then gets to the scene where Grandma sees the cup. Yeah, she saw the cup in George's hand, and yeah, she bent down, and after when she looked into it, she begins to see the brown liquid, and it almost looked like it was a cup of tea. It's because of the medicine that's the brown paint mixed it in. Then Grandma starts yelling at George for trying to not to avoid his grandma and disobeying her orders and not giving her a cup of tea. Yeah, she demands him to give the cup of tea to her, which was the medicine, not knowing what it was. And then the mother, Mrs. Cranky, tells her not to, saying that it's not for her. Yeah, she was about to say it's the magic medicine, but she didn't know how to put into words, as she was a bit scared or something to tell her. Then Grandma yells at George's mother for going against her and saying that her own daughter is trying to stop her from having her morning tea at breakfast and for starving her out. Then Mr. Cranky tells Grandma to take the cup of tea with the mixed medicine, and he tells her that it's nice and hot. And just as Grandma was about to reach her arms out for the cup, George quickly pulls it away, saying that she's not allowed to have it. Yeah, and then Mrs. Cranky was about to tell Grandma that it's George's medicine, but Grandma doesn't care and interrupts her, saying about George is this, George said, and everything, and she's had enough. Yeah, she then snatched the cup out of his hand and she carried it high up out of reach, and then Mr. Cranky tells her to drink it as he thought it was lovely tea, which the other two, like George and his mother, tells her not to by saying no, which she didn't, because it was too late. Then the ancient beanpole, referring to Grandma as the narrator describes, like, she already took a cup, and she already poured it to her mouth, like, onto her lips, and she swallowed everything that was in it all in one gulp. And when she finished, Mrs. Cranky, like, tells her that it's George's medicine, and it done the same thing to the little old brown hen that's shrunken. Yeah, and then something really bad happens.
But it was too late. The ancient beanpole had already put the cup to her lips, and in one gulp, she swallowed everything that was in it. Mother, wailed Mrs. Cranky, you've just drunk 50 doses of George's Marvellous Medicine number 4, and look what one tiny spoonful did to that little brown hen. But Grandma didn't even hear her. Great clouds of steam were already pouring out of her mouth and nose and ears, and she was beginning to whistle. This is going to be interesting, Mr. Cranky said, still grinning. Now you've done it, cried Mrs. Cranky, glaring at her husband. You've cooked the old girl's goose. I didn't do anything, Mr. Cranky said. Oh, yes, you did. You told her to drink it.
Yeah, and then gets to a scene where Grandma didn't even hear her daughter, like George's mother, by trying to tell her about the medicine that was not the cup of tea. And because the loud noise, like the clouds of steam, began coming out of her mouth and nose and her ears. Yeah, she was beginning to whistle really loudly, and then Mrs. Cranky yells at George's father, Mr. Cranky, for making her do this, which he denies, but he says that he did it, and he told her to. Yeah, the noise continues to whistle, and then Mr. Cranky says that she'll feel better after she's let off lots of steam, and then Mrs. Cranky says that she's going to blow up and burst. Her boiler will burst. And then George, who had been listening and watching, was quite alarmed. He stood up and, backed away from the noise of the whistling. Yet the steam kept coming out of Grandma's head, and it began to hurt a bit of the ears when the whistling was so high and shrill. Yet Mrs. Cranky tells them to call the fire people and to call the police to get the fire and smoke out, but Mr. Cranky says it's too late. But even as Mrs. Cranky even as Mrs. Cranky, just as after she said to Grandma to put her head under the water to get the white smoke to stop coming out, the white smoke begins to stop, and it was around this time when Grandma begins to get smaller by shrinking. Yeah, here's what the narrator was telling. Yeah, I know. It's really surprising, I know.
Grandma, shrieked Mrs. Cranky. Mother, run to the drinking trough and put your head under the water. But even as she spoke, the whistling suddenly stopped and the steam disappeared. That was when Grandma began to get smaller. She'd started off with her head as high as the roof of the house, but now she was coming down fast.
Yes, I know. Then Grandma starts to shrink, and then Mr. Cranky tells George to watch this, saying that, if anyone like Grandma starts, what else is there? I'm thinking, guys. Yeah, I know. Yeah, he tells them that this is what happens when someone's had about 50 spoonfuls of doses instead of one spoonful. Then it gets to the scene right there where Grandma was nearly back to her normal height, and then Mrs. Cranky tells her to stop as it's just right, but she didn't, as she keeps on going, getting smaller and smaller, and down she went by shrinking. And then she stops as, almost not as small as the other brown hen that's shrunken, but she got there until she was, not that much bigger than a bottle of lemonade. And then Mrs. Cranky held her onto her hands after when she asks her mother, Grandma, how she feels right now. Then Grandma yells at her daughter. She yells at her daughter again for like asking her how she feels, and then starts calling her daughter a midget, and then saying that she was like used to be a tall giant. And then Mr. Cranky tells her that the shrinking in her growth, the magic medicine of fixing Grandma, was not over yet, and she begins to shrink. Here, here's what happens.
How do you feel, Mother? Asked Mrs. Cranky anxiously. Grandma's tiny face still bore the same foul and furious expression it always had. Her eyes, no bigger now than little keyholes, were blazing with anger. How do I feel? She yelled. How do you think I feel? How would you feel if you'd been a glorious giant a minute ago and suddenly you're a miserable midget? She's still going, shouted Mr. Cranky gleefully. She's still getting smaller. And by golly, she was. When she was no bigger than a pencil, Mrs. Cranky made a grab for her. She held her in her hands and she cried, how do I stop her getting smaller still? You can't, said Mr. Cranky. She's had 50 times the right amount. By then, Grandma was the size of a matchstick and still shrinking fast. A moment later, she was no bigger than a pin, then a pumpkin seed, then... Where is she? Cried Mrs. Cranky. I've lost her. Hooray, said Mr. Cranky. She's gone. She's disappeared completely, cried Mrs. Cranky. Well, that's what happens to you if you're grumpy and bad-tempered, said Mr. Cranky. Great medicine of yours, George.
Yeah, this scene shows, that Grandma was about as no bigger than a pencil, or sometimes like a cigarette or something. Like in the book, it says that she was no bigger than a cigarette. Yeah, and then after when Mrs. Cranky made a grab hold for her in her hands, and she asks her husband, Mr. Cranky, about how she will manage to stop her from shrinking, from getting smaller, but Mr. Cranky tells him that she couldn't, and says that she's had 50 times 50 doses the right amount. They watch Grandma still shrinking, and as she was no bigger than a matchstick, or a pumpkin seed, or a pin. And then soon after that, she was gone. She disappeared. And then Mrs. Cranky got really upset and a bit angry as she wants to know. Like, she asks and gets worried about her mother, saying, where is she? And that she lost her. And that she's gone. And then Mr. Cranky says hooray and says that's what happens when you're being a bully and being grumpy and miserable. So it might be the reason why Mr. Cranky tells Grandma to take the cup of medicine, which she mistakes as a tea, and tells her to start drinking it. He then tells his son George that it's a great medicine of his, and then it gets to the ending where Mrs. Cranky soon or quickly begins to realize why her mother was acting like this. I know.
George didn't know what to think. For a few minutes, Mrs. Cranky kept wandering around with a puzzled look on her face, saying, Mother, where are you? Where have you gone? Where have you got to? How can I find you? But she calmed down quite quickly. And by lunchtime, she was saying, oh, well, I suppose it's all for the best, really. She was a bit of a nuisance around the house, wasn't she? Yes, said Mr. Cranky. She most certainly was. George didn't say a word. He felt quite trembly. He knew something tremendous had taken place that morning. For a few brief moments, he had touched with the very tips of his fingers the edge of a magic world. Goodbye.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Yeah, the ending starts with Yet George still standing there, and as he's not sure what to think, as he didn't know what to say. And then Mrs. Cranky still continues to look a bit worried, to look worried and puzzled and upset about her mother, saying where's she gone and how could she find her. But then she manages to calm herself down quite quickly, and around that time, which was lunchtime, she then sighs and says that it's probably for the best, saying that she was a bit of a nuisance and being a bully around the house. And then to which Mr. Cranky says, saying that she most was a grouch. Yeah, and then George didn't say anything as he was a bit disappointed about what he had about something place that took around that morning, and he soon begins to know that if you do something like giving someone a magical experiment or a new medicine, then you might get the constant consequences for your actions. And yeah, I know, and then for about a few moments he begins to look around the edge of a magic world, which ends the story, and it ends with Rik Mayall saying goodbye after he stops narrating and says to the audience goodbye. And yeah, I think that's all for my review on George's Marvellous Medicine. Yeah, guys, it's good to see Rik Mayall narrating George's Marvellous Medicine. Yeah, he was the narrator in Jackanory. Yeah. Yeah, and I know that. I'm aware that. Wait. I need to find where it is. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, even though, he was praised for his performance and storytelling, yeah, the BBC received complaints saying that it might be a bit dangerous. And yeah, the beginning of the story has a disclaimer saying it tells you to never make George's Marvellous Medicine yourselves at home, because it would be dangerous. And yeah, here's an interview of Rik Mayall's, interview on the art of storytelling. I watched the whole video. Yeah, to see.
Storytelling?
Yeah, to talk about his storytellings, and on Jackanory and Roald Dahl as well, yeah.
Has always been one of my great pleasures. And when I was young, I saw some of my heroes doing it on the telly. I wanted to talk about Spike Milligan, Peter Sellers, Arthur Lowe, Ian McKellen.
Arthur Lowe, I know him.
Kenneth Williams.
Yes,
that's a handful. These are all guys telling stories to me. I mean, okay, I might have still watched it when I was a teenager. And they're fantastic because you got such close intimacy with the person telling you the story. It's a real pleasure. It's one of telly's great things. And I personally like doing it as well. I did Jackanory. So I did a Roald Dahl tale called George's Marvellous Medicine, which is, there was a bit of a fuss about it at the time.
Yeah, I know.
Because it was basically a story about a kid trying to poison his grandmother.
Oh.
Which is a bit, and I did it in kind of a lively way, so there were complaints at the time. I'd like to have Vincent Price read me a story. He's got such a lovely voice and such a great manner. But I think H.P. Lovecraft is who I'd like to have read me a story as well. Probably Marilyn, of course. Kate Moss. I love Shaky Bill tell me a story.
Yeah.
I mean, William Shakespeare. He could squeak and nib, couldn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a passing shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his weary hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. See, I mean, he could write. He could write.
Yeah.
He's a belter. Old Shaky Bill, he could squeak a nib. So imagine someone who could write as well as that, saying, "Good even, Rick. I have a story to tell you." Wouldn't you go, go on then. What? What makes a great story? A great storyteller. I genuinely believe. Even if you have a very simple story, if you know how to seduce your audience, then you're all right.
Yeah.
And also a great storyteller will twist and take some little bits and just add a little bit here and a little bit there. Put in a couple of good action scenes and, I don't know, change it around a bit. Yeah, I think that was a good answer, actually. I think what makes a great story is a great storyteller.
Yeah. Good one. Yeah, rest in peace to Rik Mayall and Roald Dahl as well. Good one. Yeah, I'd give my review rating on George's Marvellous Medicine maybe like a 6 or 7 and 8 out of 10, I know. But yeah, guys, I think that's all for this video. Yeah, I'd give the story like maybe a 7 or 8 out of 10, like even though it is nostalgic, but also got a bit of complaints. But I'm pretty sure not every kid has to do what George does. I know it's dangerous and all, but I'm lucky I didn't do that. Otherwise, I would have been in trouble and grounded for life. But yeah, hope you guys like, comment, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos. And yeah, I know Rik Mayall was in movies I've watched before, like Drop Dead Fred. I'll watch his other sitcom shows one day by the BBC. And I know that he mentioned Arthur Lowe in the video. I know he's the narrator of the Mr. Men series. But yeah, and Spike Milligan, I've heard of him. Yeah. Hope you guys like, comment, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos. And yeah, hope I'll see you guys next time in any other video. So yeah, goodbye everyone. Peace out, and I love you all. Bye. Yeah, goodbye everyone. Yeah, that's all. Bye. Oh yeah, guys. Yeah, I know I was gonna end the video, but I just want to show you guys something. Like, I'll watch this one video for a bit. It's like almost 1 minute, where Rik Mayall telling the viewers to not do dangerous stuff like in George's Marvellous Medicine. Don't do any bad things here. Saw a bit of Garfield there on the wall. And when Rik Mayall was narrating, I saw a cow on the picture of a cow on the wall in this Jackanory video. But yeah, let's continue. Let's continue.
BBC have asked me to tell you children not to poison your granny. Don't do what I do in George's Marvellous Medicine.
Which is great fun, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, because it's a waste of poison. Save it for your teachers.
Oh.
That'll get me into trouble. George removed the lid and began very slowly to pour the thick brown stuff into the spoon. He couldn't help thinking back upon all the mad and marvellous things that had gone into the making of this crazy stuff. The shaving soap, the hair remover, the dandruff cure, the automatic washing machine powder, the flea powder for dogs, the shoe polish, the black pepper, the horseradish sauce, and all the rest of them. Not to mention the powerful animal pills and powders and liquids, and the brown paint. Open your mouth wide, Grandma, he said, and I'll pop it in. The old hag opened her small wrinkled mouth, showing disgusting pale brown teeth. Here we go, George cried out. Swallow it down. And he pushed the spoon well into her mouth and tipped the mixture down her throat. Then he stepped back to watch the result.
Yeah, I know, that's kind of a good video. Okay, guys, I'll be going, so yeah, goodbye, everyone. Yeah, that's all, bye.